Try to get it more visible here. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So, compare the kind of water use and the water available out of the Missouri River. Right now, there's just under 1 million acre feet per year, 0.98 million acre feet. The future use permits are at 1.4 acre feet per year, and that's statewide. So you got a total of 2.3 million acre feet per year. What we looked at was the water flows in Bismarck and Sioux City, Iowa. So what you got there is, on average, you got 19.8 million acre feet per year coming out of Bismarck, and you have 27.9 on average leaving the state. So there's a surplus extra water going in the state. We're talking, is that about 8 million acre feet. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Also, in the Sioux Mines report, they also did a little cost estimate there. For 10,000 acre feet, they projected a 3-foot diameter pipe to do that, and that cost at that time they were looking at over $500,000. They also did one for 7,600 acre feet per year at 6-foot diameter, and their total cost would be just over $1.8 billion to complete that. And if I remember correct, that was coming out of Lake Oahe, just north of Fort Pierre. Go ahead and go next slide. So, in 2020, what we did, what you're familiar with, is we scanned all the stakeholders, we did our initial information meetings, and developed that next steps. And that's where, kind of this study started about there, and then trying to form a new organization to carry, a new water source for western South Dakota. Next slide. So there were the list of the meetings that we did throughout 2020 with the school mines, raw water systems, Missouri River permits, some case studies that we had were the Lewis and Clark Regional Water System. I know we also looked into the Mini Washtay system and a few other ones. Probably the Lewis and Clark is more representative of how this system is, the direction it appears to be going. We also spoke with several funding agencies, the state, USDA Rural Development, and the Bureau of Rec. Go ahead to the next slide. And that report had the recommendations for your governance, which would be forming that new nonprofit, and then a technical evaluation, and then pursuing funding, whether that's state, federal, or a combination. And this report would be that first portion of that. To kind of recap, the Lewis and Clark system is very critical to the Sioux Falls area, providing water, and I think right now they're actually going to expand that. And if you recall from some of those meetings, some of those entities that didn't want to be in there now want to be in there, but they're not able to tie on quite so easily or increase their water that they wanted. So it's forward thinking is very critical. The next slide. So we have, what come out of that was the West Dakota Regional Water System is now the new org that formed to carry this on. Talbot was with Gunderson Palmer was the attorney on that. Helped get that put in. That was end of September officially. So with all our meetings, those are all the participants. You have several of your development districts, communities and rural water systems throughout western South Dakota. Next slide. So this is a layout of the reports that typically go on as we're doing a larger scale project like this. What we do is what we called out in our early on was a needs assessment, trying to see what needs are out there, what there is, and who's interested in it. And this would be the first portion of that, which we're calling the water use study. So it encapsulates kind of what the needs are, but we don't go directly into details on routes or what is feasible coming from here or there, directly into costs, mostly looking at the demand. That'll be the later half of the needs assessment, and then what we required after the needs assessment would be doing a feasibility study, or we call a preliminary engineering report, and that would be determining whether it's feasible to draw the water from the Missouri River, or if it's feasible, say one area can pull from a well more feasible than tying it on. And then from there you do the project funding and then rolling in design construction. Next slide. So with this study we sent out questionnaires. Let's say there's 54 potential bulk users that we sent out to. There was also 315 smaller users that we sent the questionnaires out to. The returns weren't very good on the small users. The bulk users were the majority of them that we got back. We received 19 back and 13 requests, and the total request is 49.1 million gallons per day. The other questions we had on there was current water source, current population, asked them projected future population out to 2075, getting their rates, different things on like agricultural demand, whether they got livestock on their list, and then how much water they would request. Next slide. So we looked at the population trends. We went back to the last 50 years and projected that out. We did it by county, and then that's total of all the counties that were in the study area. The lowest county growth was Jones at negative 1.5% per year over the last 50 years, and Pennington County was the highest at 1.23% per year. So the average across the study area was 0.85% annual growth, and there's currently 233,794 residents. And that, I got a map in here, I think it's later on in the slide too, that kind of shows the study area. It's majority of western South Dakota. Next slide. So from that history, I did some projections. The one is the historical, so if you take the average per county, and you extended that out, the growth on that would end up until 2075, the growth would be about 0.98% per year. So you have over 400,000 residents within the study area. And then I also did some modest projections, and then kind of did an anticipated projection where we put in a higher growth for Pennington County, seeing that with recent development and maybe taking off more closer to similar how Sioux Falls' growth is. And then on the left side of there, I also showed some of the questionnaire data. The average growth from the questionnaires, the raw data, was just over 2%. If I just took it from the member entities, it was 2.12%. There were some that didn't have the future projection, so what I did was I took my projections for each of those counties and put that in there, and those member entities are just under a 2% growth is what it averaged. So, and then my anticipated projection there, the highest line, is overall the entire West Dakota is 1.62%. So you'd have 576,000 from that, I also did a livestock analysis and figured out roughly how many livestock are in there from census data. And then also from the questionnaires. From there, I was able to calculate current water usage within the study area, and then the projected demands based on that. So based on the population and the animal units, is how I broke it down, and taking information from the questionnaires, we'd be looking at about 37 million gallons per day currently used in the study area. And the projection based off the increase in population, and assuming that as systems grow, they're going to also add on a few extra egg users. So your livestock projection I didn't put in there a livestock projection to increase, but the amount served is going to increase over the next 50 years. So that brought it up to 92, just under 93 million gallons per day. The member entities requested the 49.1, and then I also took what they had in projection for the populations, filled in the ones that didn't have theirs based on the growth for that area. And that projection come out to just under 69 MGD. And then if you take, and then it ended up happening, I didn't plan it that way, but if you added the existing water use, existing water sources based off those questionnaires is 19.8. You added that to their requested 49.1, they come out the same within a tenth of a million gallons per day. And then not in the report, but I also put on there was the West Dakota area, what the entities in there that requested the water, their request was for just under 36 million gallons per day within your study, within your district. Assuming that they're all going to use their existing water and this is going to be supplemental water, they'd be looking at 47.1 million gallons per day, which I believe is about 60 to 70% of the total requested water, or the projected water. And then I also broke it down for what was outside, so the remaining amount was about 13 million gallons per day. So about almost 3/4. So here's a study. You can go ahead and go to that.
Okay.
So here's a study area, and that was kind of based, started out entire western South Dakota, but based on responses, we narrowed it down slightly. So it's entire western South Dakota minus Dewey, Ziebach, Corson, Harding, and Tripp and Gregory counties. And there you can kind of see the water use, current water use is 37 million gallons per day, projected just under 93, and the requested is 49.1 million gallons per day. And then the lowest flows from Bismarck and Sioux City, Iowa. The difference there is there's just under 4,600 million gallons per day. Next slide. So based on the lowest flows and the average flows through the Missouri River, the requested water is only 0.04% of the water leaving the state, and it's only 1.1% of that difference on the low end. When you go to average, it's under 1%. It's 0.7% of the average flow of just the difference, and it's only 0.2% on what is leaving the state for the request. And then the other percentages on there, the 3.3 and the 5%, those are current permits and future years permits. So then you got that big chunk, which is the remaining flow in there in the river. So, and like I mentioned earlier, the West Dakota Regional Water System is now changed to the councils held at Missouri. They were incorporated at the end of September. The board of directors currently are the city of New Underwood, city of Box Elder, city of Rapid City, city of Hill City, Oglala Sioux Tribe, Minnetonka Rural Water System, and then alternative directors would be city of Spearfish and West River Lyman Jones Rural Water. And they've currently submitted an application for the state water plan. That was submitted before October 1st on the deadline, and I believe the first thing to put in for the funding before January 1st. Got any questions?
Based on one, just overall on this study, how, by looking in the future 2075, how short did you calculate existing water resources to be from satisfying the overall demand at that time?
Well, if you go back a few slides, you can clarify that a little bit.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear, okay.
So, from that mines report, it's showing in your district area, you have 60 CFF for your budget on an average year. I think it's 22, but that 60 CFS comes out to about 38 million gallons per day.
I'm just looking for a number. In 2075, I assume you made an estimation of what the total demand for water was going to be.
93 million gallons per day.
And at that point in time, did you estimate what percentage of that could be satisfied by currently existing resources?
What's currently being used is around 30 MGD.
So are you saying that
our
in
questionnaires.
2075, we're gonna be 60 million short from satisfying need?
Well, the issue you run into there, you may have a large volume of water underneath, but how much can you take out? You know,
I guess
the
that's what
amount
I'm
coming,
asking you.
amount coming in is that's what, you know, the mines report.
Did you assess that? I've read through all your various sections in this thing, and I don't have a clear understanding of how short we are projected to be in existing water resources in the area to satisfy your projected need. Which to me is a number that would drive the necessity for a pipeline. But I don't see that number anywhere.
The actual quantity on there is not specifically called out
Okay.
in that. There's several reports that make assumptions, and those parts for reference. But the actual budget amount isn't directly determined. The closest one I have is the school mines. And according to that, you're gonna be about 9 million gallons per day short.
Any other questions? Not seeing any, I would like to thank Dana for the report and for the information that they provided today. Number 12 on the agenda is consider funding request from Jason Phillips for a second phase of the stormwater inventory to follow the previous pilot effort that was completed by Mr. Phillips. That is you, Director Driscoll.
So, very brief background on this. Most of you would recall that we had an arrangement with School of Mines to conduct an inventory of basically impervious surfaces, properties with impervious surfaces within 3 of the named drainage basins, urban drainage basins within Rapid City. It was a pilot project. The intent was to basically see how much effort was involved. That was conducted by Mr. Phillips, who is here and will speak to us in a minute. So, my intent in that original study was to be able to really try to determine where might be many of the impervious surfaces, properties with impervious in Rapid City were constructed prior to the onset of our modern stormwater management practices, which, nowadays require some sort of mitigation to hold back the excess flow and, mitigate water quality. Many of these properties haven't gone in before that. There are some number of them that could conceivably be retrofitted to improve the stormwater management at relatively low cost. Many of them are very high cost, but the intent of this project, the pilot project, was really to determine, be able to rank them, where could we get the most bang from the buck if we were to look at, trying to do some sort of a program where we might help fund, retrofits, if we might want to call it that. So that project was completed, and Jason is still a PhD candidate at the School of Mines. If we would move forward with this work, he would actually be doing it under the umbrella of Terrasite Design. Is that the official name? Yep. He's, Jason is employed by them on a part-time basis. Is that accurate while you're doing your PhD work? Yep. So, my thought has been to, complete several more of the basins within the city that are really the best candidates for this sort of work. Many of the basins are in the outlying areas where, most of the development that's taking place comes under the current stormwater management rules, and, really no need to do those. So, I've talked with Jason about a limited number of basins where I think it would be beneficial to do additional work, and I'm really anxious to have it done, by Jason, so that everything gets done efficiently and in the same fashion as what was done before. So, at my request, Jason had prepared this proposal that's in your packet. You've all had a chance to see it in advance, and so with that background, I'll make a motion that we fund this proposal at the requested amount of $24,950.
Second.
Seconded by McGregor.
And so with that, I think Jason's got just a couple of very short slides and a couple minutes worth of overview for us.
A quick question, I want to get the motion right. So we're going to write a check to Terrasite Design?
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I had.
So as Dan mentioned, I'm Jason Phillips. I'm employed with Terrasite Design and finishing up my PhD at South Dakota School of Mines. I'm in my last year of collecting all the field data and then a lot of writing and data analysis ahead of me. So going to the next slide. I'm going to skip over these. Dan kind of gave a good overview of the issues of the land use changes and that we're having with stormwater and the effects it has with the quantities and qualities. The overall goals of this project that we started was the focus on potential small-scale on-site stormwater management improvement areas and parking lots and these big impervious areas, and how we could disconnect them and implement green infrastructure and low-impact development designs within the parking lots, doing rain gardens and bioswales, etc. So the process of that was inventorying these impervious areas and these green spaces and developing a series of parameters within a geodatabase to be able to rank these sites to kind of see where you could get your biggest bang for your buck and take that and move it on to the next feasibility study of what sites can we actually start implementing some of these projects. So in the initial phase, there was 5 drainage bases that were selected, and this was through meetings with Dakota Water Development District and the city and the county. The 5 basins that were selected were the South Canyon, Mead Hawthorne, the Knollwood, the Haynes Avenue, and the Racetrack. And during that first phase, we completed the Mead Hawthorne, Racetrack, and Knollwood. So the two left are the South Canyon and the Haynes Avenue basins.
I'll clarify for Jason if I may, we identified these 5 as candidate basins, not knowing how many we could get done at the level we were funding. And
Yep.
it turned out that we were able to complete 3 of the 5 at that funding level. That was kind of the pilot part of it.
So the next slide, so within the proposal, to do just 2 more, I figured if I'm gonna be out doing it and collecting all the data, add 2 more basins to it, since I got a lot of the legwork is already done. I'm gonna be writing the reports and the presentations and compiling all of it in there. Just seemed like you'd get, again, a bigger bang for your buck to do 4 instead of just doing the remaining 2. So we added the downtown basin and the Morningside basin, which are on the north and south sides of Rapid Creek through the
I think
downtown.
you could walk up and highlight them, point them out. Actually, if you start down with Mead, Hawthorne was,
Yep, so we did this basin,
that's the most southerly that we'd worked in, correct?
yep, we did the
Yep.
Mead Hawthorne, and then we did the Racetrack basin, and then we did the Knollwood basin. And so the other one of the 2 that we identified was the Haynes Avenue, which is this green one, and then the South Canyon basin. And then so we're proposing to do the Morningside basin and then this downtown basin.
That would kind of tie things together in a bit of a cluster, with the exception of Racetrack, we'd done because we wanted to do something outside the city limits, and
Yeah, we
South
can-
Canyon had been one of the candidates, so we really
Yep.
wanted to target that.
Next up. So I'll be following the same methods that we did the original study in. A big push of that was developing these fields within the geodatabase and kind of test running them through and collecting the data and analyzing it and ranking it and kind of adjusting these parameters to be able to come up with a good ranking system to prioritize which sites have your biggest bang for your buck. Next slide. So same deliverables, we're just going to be expanding that geodatabase, and it's basically a GIS tool that you could use, and other communities could use this tool and this process with GIS. So if you're up in Hill City or any community really could take the same logic and the GIS, the geodatabase, and develop it within their community. So it's not just for Rapid City. The study is within Rapid City, but it could be, tailored to other communities with that geodatabase and GIS platform. Excellent. And so to give you an example of kind of the final outcome of what you get out of this tool, this is the Mead Hawthorne Basin that we did during the phase 1 part of the project. And so after you rank all of these sites, you come up with a ranking of 1 through 5, 5 being, this is the most, your biggest bang for your buck, site, versus your 1 being not so much. It doesn't mean that these are the sites that necessarily need it the most. It's just the sites that, through the ranking process, are the better candidates for implementing a green infrastructure project. Be more feasible than some of the other areas. So the timeline and budget. The initial project, we did it through a course of 6 months. This one we're proposing doing it over the course of 9 months. We're kind of moving into winter, so give us some leeway area of depending on kind of weather constraints. And for my scheduling with my PhD and with work, it's not going to just be all crunched together and done in a streamlined process. I'll be able to spread it out over some time. So I could field any questions if anybody has any questions on it, or.
After this, how many basins will be left undone?
Well, there's 27 named
27, I think,
Named
is what we
basins.
found out, but I guess, in my perception, completing this really completes the large majority of what is really needed within the city. You know, many of the, like I say, many of the basins are out there in the developing areas, and basically effective stormwater management practices are required as they develop. So I think this really targets most of the part of the city where this work would really be beneficial. I personally see very little need for additional similar work.
Yeah.
I think this really wraps this
So
up.
these areas are basically those parts where development occurred without particular regard to these issues around.
Right, before stormwater management was even being thought about.
I was just curious,
That's okay. No, you go ahead.
I was just curious, are you working with this city, Rapid City on their, with their MS4 permit? Is that a lot of this information that you use?
No, we don't, no, this won't have any kind of tie-ins with what the city's required to do for their MS4 permit.
Information for how they need to implement their MS4 permit.
Yeah, and with this data, I mean, this data is not gonna be limited to, we're prioritizing sites. I mean, you could take the data that we collected and analyze it in all sorts of different ways and use it with other data to look at different things. This particular project is just kind of prioritizing sites, but the data is collected and gonna be available.
Sure. Thanks, Jason, first of all, for your presentation. I have a question about your budget, and the $19,950 allotted to supporting your efforts. Is that paid directly to you as a type of payroll? And is there a breakdown by hour of that $19,950?
So I'm gonna be the only one working on this project so TerraSite's a small company, there's a few of us, it's a landscape civil design firm, and so I proposed this to them as a project that I was doing when we wanted to do this next phase. And so, we initially talked about just me doing it under, Phillips Consulting and doing it that route. And then I proposed it to TerraSite, and they said they were fine with running it through them and having me do the work underneath their company. And so they'll be paying me my same hourly rate that I would get paid regardless of what project I was working on.
Sure. So what is that $19,950 for?
To go towards funding my hours.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Relative to the question about the MS4, we have coordinated, with the city on this, and furthermore, relative to MS4, we've actually been in discussion with their, Brendan Quiet is their primary stormwater management lead. We are in discussion about partnering with them to basically take a lead for public involvement and outreach education components of the MS4, and this work is considered one of the things that we do that really contributes to that as an overall effort. So these things tie together.
Sure, it made sense.
Yeah, these things, there's some logic to our madness.
Yeah, Tom?
I've got a question, I probably should remember this from the first effort, but is that geodatabase something that's gonna be, readily, accessible / housed, by, let's say the water district here, so that if we wanted to, provide it, the structure of it to another community, that could be done as part of a deliverable? And then the second part of that question is, when you're buying, I presume because you're no longer with the mines, you're buying a new laptop and some software and a GIS unit, what will be the fate of those, when you're done? Is that something that we could have?
Well, the GIS is, they charge it yearly, it's basically a yearly fee, just like their AutoCAD, software programs and stuff, so you don't get to buy it anymore and just have, have the software. It's a yearly fee that you gotta pay to be a member. And so, and we tried to get this housed on Rapid Map in the city. It's kind of back and forth discussions. It kind of got left as probably not going to be housed under there.
Well, that would be another topic under this MS4 arrangement that we're talking about. You know, I will be pushing that we would actually, you know, be able to serve it up under Rapid Map. Whether or not that happens, I'll be pushing for it.
But to answer your question, yeah, it'll be readily available to where that geodatabase could be, you know, provided to somebody else that wants to carry on this study or use it as the tool to prioritize sites in their community and stuff. So it'll be, we don't know exactly how that's going to be available because you guys don't have a GIS platform. The board, you know, the water district doesn't have. You guys don't pay the annual fee, and so you don't have access to that software and that geodatabase to speak of. You know, and so the city, I don't know if the city could kind of have some kind of joint licensing or to where you guys would be able to have that, or how we could.
I don't think joint
figure that
licensing
out,
would be feasible, but again, if they could serve it on Rapid Map, and as we discussed, you know, this MS4 partnership, that topic's gonna be on the table, you know, for sure. The other end of it, in the final delivery, you know, I would expect it's very easy to provide your ranking, the fields involved in ranking, and basically something akin to an Excel format, right, to where we can preserve it in that fashion, correct?
Yeah, and there's you know, ARC Online, and so there's ways and there's formats of putting it out there and being able to have that and access to it. There's just, you guys don't have that capability because you don't have the access to it. So that is something that we're going to get figured out and figure out how do we get this available to the public.
Any other questions? Yes.
Less of a question and more of a comment. I'm sure that if needed, we could find someone at the school lines to put out that sort of map or database information on the site. Probably under the school department. I mean, there's things like that on the school lines website all over the place. Generally, if it's a need, that given the fact that Jason has a student that
Well, kind of back to Ron's question, does the handheld GPS and laptop stay with you when the project is completed?
Yeah, it'll be on the desktop, and so, and then the fees come with Art Collector as part of the GIS software that you purchase on a yearly platform, and then the fees of, you know, the handheld it's on your phone. And so you got Art Collector as an app on your phone, so when I'm field verifying, I'm using my phone and the data and being able to field verify and update any information that is done on the GIS desktop platform. And so they just, Art Pro and Art Collector are just tools that go back and forth from being able to be in the field and on the desktop.
Not seeing any more questions from the public. The motion on the floor by Driscoll, seconded by McGregor, is to fund Terrasite Design for the second phase of stormwater inventory for $24,950. All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed state by saying aye.
I
Let's do a roll call, Dan.
Sure. Okay, agenda item, I'll just reread that. Motion by Driscoll, seconded by McGregor, to fund Terrasite Design for the second phase of the stormwater inventory for $24,950. Roll call. Harris?
Aye.
Fleming?
Aye.
Mack?
Aye.
Rowe? Nothigal?
Yay.
McGregor?
Aye.
Driscoll?
Aye.
Bierke? And Koth? A motion carries, 1 no vote.
Next item on the agenda, which was 14, which is now 13, to consider sponsoring a forum as a special West Dakota Water Development District meeting to address current water issues. Driscoll.
Could we pick up number 8 at this time? Heidi is here to address number 8.
Are there any oppositions to moving 8 to 13 due to the scheduling conflict?
She lives down at her most, anybody that wants to get home as near her most as soon as possible. Anyhow, so we had heard from the mines folks here at the previous meeting that, about the fire that had damaged the living lab that is also, a demo project for us for our erosion control work. The proposal is in the packet, and I see we've got basically a sheet here. There was a slight change to the actual budget sheet. Was that kind of what the deal was?
Well, that didn't make it into the packet.
Right.
I think that's the latest one, though.
Right.
So I had to print it separately.
With that bare minimum background I feel is needed, I'll put a motion on the table that we fund this work for the requested amount of $5,000.
Is there a second to the motion?
A second.
Seconded by Noctigal. Floor is yours.
Thank you. We are really excited to start working with those people. The students have been making some observations as part of the geotech class. And I am pleased to say actually that there might have been some good with the fire, and the fact that it's brought a lot of attention to the project and to what West Dakota and the school is doing to help the community. So we're excited, and thank you. We'll be definitely back and show some updates, and hopefully this spring we can get some revegetation and other exciting things happening.
Are there any questions from the board? Not.
Well, yeah, I think I had a question. I can't find it here, but I think the original amount that we funded, it was not entirely spent.
I believe it was.
That was a-
Oh,
So the
okay.
school covered a portion of it, or is that not what their accounting says?
The one that wasn't spent was the inventory. This one was fully spent.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
never mind.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
we went quite a bit over. But, the department is covering some additional costs as well, and we continue to do that. We really would love to see more living lab opportunities.
Any other questions? See none. The motion on the floor by Driscoll, seconded by Noctigal, is to fund the South Dakota Mines rehabilitation of fire damage for the amount of $5,000. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Okay, now item 14, which is now item 14, consider the sponsor of a forum as a special West Dakota Water Development District meeting to address current water issues. That one's you, Dan.
Did you say 14, which is 14, or I think it's become 13?
No, it is, because 8 moved to technically on the spot of. Anyway,
Well, it doesn't
I'm
matter.
sorry.
Regarding sponsorship of a forum as a special meeting, I kind of raised this possibility at our last meeting. All the water issues that we're hearing around here. One of the things in particular, we've of course had our progress report from Banner on the Missouri River water, and one of my main concerns, we may in fact go this route of the Missouri River water. To date, there's been no real evaluation of what might be done, with what you might call regionalized water supply using local sources of water. Certainly my career with USGS, I'm pretty familiar with, what could be available. you know, I think it's something that we need to look at as one particular water issue. Another possibility, might ask Director Cope to touch on it, but some of these issues on might we be able to change our management mechanisms on the Pectola and Deerfield systems? Was it your thought, Ron, that we might be able to free up a little bit of water under a different management scenario?
Well, we funded a master's program from School of Mines. Rosemary Spillis did a master's thesis on sort of a snapshot view using historical data that suggested that we were still at a considerable amount of water from Pectola on an average annual basis that potentially could be repurposed, you know, and serve some regional needs. The old Brennan Reservoir topic has come up again as far as how to recycle some of that water in the valley. So yeah, it's a possibility. We just need to get traction with the right entities to actually examine it. So far, we are spinning our wheels on getting traction.
Well, I guess I probably should expand a little more on my thought here. If we would do something like this, I don't have a timetable in mind, other than that perhaps, you know, I'd certainly serve on a committee, and if there were others that might want to join in, kind of look at how might we do this and when. I don't see it as something that would happen this calendar year. I mean, well, we'd have to vote on it that, you know, in December at the earliest, and likely on beyond that. So I guess that's what I would really have in mind, would be if anyone would want to join into a committee, we could talk about how might we do it.
So what I'm hearing is Dan wants to form a committee about possibly sponsoring a forum. Looks like Dan has also taken the responsibility of wanting to lead the committee. If you don't want to lead this committee,
I'll certainly be willing to play any sort of a role.
okay.
I'm willing to serve on it.
Okay, Scott for committee. Anybody else would like to serve on this possible sponsoring a forum? I will join in on that. So, as
Certainly people like Beerkey,
can help in
his
there.
arm might be twisted, but it'd be pretty informal for at most.
Yep, so we will form the committee as the acting chair, McGregor, Mack, and Driscoll, to look into the possibility of considering sponsoring a forum. So that,
And before we do any voting, I don't know if there's some folks in the audience that I kind of know this might be on the
committees are assigned by the chair, so we don't have to vote on it.
Anyhow, if there are any of these folks who want to touch on any of the issues that are out there, I'd like to give them an opportunity for a very brief action.
I think he's alluding to some discussions that we had in the past. When we're talking about the water issues, we have significantly more issues than just water availability. When we're looking at the rapid development that we have in the area of there are specifically some concerns about wastewater handling, septic tanks, long-term planning as far as the management of wastewater and drinking water and reuse of that water. So I think when we're looking at this sort of forum, we have to look holistically at the problem of water resources in the Black Hills, and specifically around the growth that's happening in our communities. Because, quite frankly, I don't think anyone at this point is prepared for the rate of development, and we're not keeping up. We just aren't able to plan and grow enough at this point in time to accommodate that growth. So, okay, I would love to see a bigger picture issue as well. And I know I've spoken to some commissioners, and they're concerned with it as well. I think the city's concerned with it, and the county is. It's an issue that we're all very, very aware of, and would like to see some solutions.
what do you vision from, is this a meeting that would be done publicly to have a lot of ideas discussed? Or when you say forum, I'm thinking of a meeting, you know, 20 people in the room. And that's Mark Anderson, for the record, which we, anyhow, of course, I'm suggesting if we would do such a thing, it would be, done as a special meeting, which is open to the public, of course. And I guess what I would envision trading ideas with other committee members is, the most important thing would be, who would we want to hear from, you know, Gary Drews was here, you know, at my invitation, maybe he was gonna come anyhow, but, you know, he had talked with me about some of these issues, you know, a lot of the growth up in the Rockerville area, how do they handle it? Folks from DENR, you know, so I would envision one possibility is we might try to have let's say a handful of people prepared to speak briefly, you know, 15, 20 minutes on some of these issues that they're dealing with, and perhaps then evolve into more of a roundtable discussion. I really don't know exactly how to do it, so I, you know, certainly would welcome input from people like our Hard Rocker Water Ambassador. Mark was in the Hard Rocker magazine here the other day, a nice article about him. So, you know, I might look to people like you to, how could we do such a thing? So,
I'll make two comments real quick. There's some issues that I think ought to be looked at. One is that the way it's working in the west now is water is being made available for municipal use mainly by the retirement of irrigation, crop irrigation. You know, it'd be a much shorter pipeline to go up to Orman Dam and get water, or a much shorter pipeline to go down there in the store and retire some of those irrigation rights. I'm not proposing that, I'm just saying it's something we ought to look at. It would certainly be a smaller pipeline and a much shorter one. The other thing, and Carol and I have talked about this a little bit, and that is, one of the things I think we need to look at is what are the consequences of inaction? You know, in other words, if we do nothing, you know, the worst possible time to think about how to get another source of water is when the well dry. So the idea is really important, I think, to be a responsible thing to do is to plan now. And because one of the things in terms of that consequences of inaction is, right now, Madison limestone is the source for most of the drill that's happening. People drill more wells, actually, collectively, almost all the cities around the hills rely on Madison limestone. A lot of water down there, but you don't have to drop the head very much when you start drying up springs, which feed places like Fish Factory and Rock Creek. So it's not negative. It isn't an exhaustible resource and can't be just continued to be developed without some adverse consequences. So two things. One is other pipelines could be further, like you look at the water quality issue. Patty mentioned we'd be introducing a lot of different chemistry into the system, along the wastewater system, but it also, I'm kind of protective of the Madison limestone. I think we've got a decent hole. It's where we can go in times of drought to get us through these tough times, and we should try to regionally manage it. I guess that's the plan. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
Go
ahead.
I would just add to not overlook governance issues. You know, from the standpoint that, you know, here you are a slice of western South Dakota. Once upon a time, there was the Black Hills Conservancy Subdistrict made up of several counties that got collapsed into just a few water districts. And now, as we've talked about here, as part of the looking at the water use, there's 350 separate water permits of the kind that Mark Mayer was talking about earlier today. So how does that look from a cumulative effects standpoint, and not just zero in on what that particular well was, but how do we coordinate all of this growth, really? And so, don't forget governance on the farm.
Thank you very much, and now the next item is the update on LaCroix and Star Village erosion control projects, informational only, Mr. Driscoll.
So page 8 of the treasurer's report shows the expenditures to date. Without going into details, we've only expended about a third of what we've allocated. Our work at LaCroix, we've really only spent one day there installing some grow wall that's got about 1,000 feet in the Rapid City Parks Department showed up with about 10 people and made quick work of that, and we'll have another iteration soon. Actually, I was gonna make them today, but the weather dictated to do something different. So, we're a little behind schedule there, but we'll quickly catch up. Many of you have spent some time on the chain gang up there at Star Village, and, I guess, to me, it feels like we've done more work than I envisioned doing. It's, an awful lot of work. We've made a lot of progress. The amount of time we've got available tonight, I'm not gonna go into any more details than that, and I think the only other thing I'll mention is that, you know, slowly but surely we're gaining more volunteers to help us, and the best way to find new volunteers seems to be word of mouth, talking to people. You know, I find people that, you know, many of them are retired from the water profession. They care about water and they can see the logic and why we do this, and I'll just encourage folks to, you know, in your daily travels, when you see people that you think might be interested, just tell them a little about it and ask if they'd be interested in helping someday. If there's no questions, we can go on to your next item.
Okay, item number 15.
There's a photo, by the way, of LaCroix.
So, item number 15 marked on the agenda, looks like Jay isn't here, but we do have some DANR people to discuss the rotating basin study.
So, you want to give your name just so that my name is Paul Lorenzen, and I am the watershed assessment team leader for the watershed protection program at DANR.
I'm gonna move this microphone.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know you guys probably, there probably isn't anybody here that hasn't heard of the rotating basin project that we implemented over the last couple of years. So I don't want to get into great detail on what it is and why. I will say, Jay was planning on being here. It was originally supposed to be, we wanted to get on the board, on the meeting so that we could talk about the next rotation. As most of you probably know, East Dakota Water Development District did the first assessment in the Big Sioux. You'll see it's that kind of gray basin, the Big Sioux, red, and Minnesota. And that project was wrapped up here in September. So we would really be looking to go to the next basin. When we originally put this together, our vision was to do have East Dakota do the Big Sioux Basin and then roll over into the James River Water Development District and have them start that southern part of their basin. Jay had come to us probably a month ago or so, or maybe longer, and he had an opportunity where an employee of his was looking to move to Rapid City. Long-standing employee, really knows how to, really good at water sampling, very organized, and he wanted to move out to Rapid City, and we thought, well, Jay was kind of trying to convince us this would be a good idea to kind of maybe just move the project out west here and have Jay's employee and maybe some interns run the next phase of the next rotation of the project. So what we were really looking to do, we weren't really ready, I guess, to come to the board and kind of start developing a partnership. I think we've talked about it over time, but we really hadn't most everything to inform. So it was really going to kind of put us on the spot here to kind of come to you, get you up to speed on what was going on, or what we were thinking anyhow, in terms of moving the assessment out west. And so that's why I think we were gonna originally come today for this meeting. In the interim of, when Jay asked to be on the agenda, and then today, I think Jay's employee took to take another job, and so that kind of fell through. And so, we were kind of sitting back, left with, okay, what do we wanna do? We could go to the James River Basin and kind of work through that process, or we could maybe just continue out west. I will say that west was, kind of intriguing because we really do have probably some of our most, we're most limited on data in a lot of the western streams and lakes. So I think it was something that once we started talking about coming out this way, we figured out, let's keep going. So that's kind of in a nutshell why I'm here, to talk about that. Plus, I think it was important for me to introduce myself to everybody. I don't know if you've heard of me, or some of you I know Linda a little bit from a long time ago. But, so anyhow, I just wanted to introduce myself, because what I'm really seeking here is a partnership. And what does that partnership look like? One, I have to assume that water quality data is important to you, especially within your district boundary, for lakes and streams. And so far to this point, most of you probably know how East Dakota operates. They have a staff. They have 2-3 people that they have on full time. They do a lot of water monitoring. They do a lot of stuff. James River is in a position to do those same kinds of things. West Dakota isn't at this point, and I don't know what your plans are, in the future. But at this moment, a partnership would probably look like funding. I'm no salesman, but that's the truth of the matter. Within this document, first off, let me back up. So, because the original assessment idea that Jay had coming out west with I guess it's Kevin, because that simply fell through, what we were thinking is we do have enough staff out in Black Hills office, or in the Rapid City office. Most of you know Jesse Wilkins. And we just recently hired this summer a new employee to work with him out here. Her name is Jordan Fosford. I don't know if you've been, I know Jesse's been to me, but I don't know if you guys have met Jordan at this point. It's not a project. We think between those two folks and hiring a couple of interns, that we can probably have the manpower to do the lake sampling and stream sampling that we want to do. What we aren't sure on at this point is what we go with. We do have funding sources there, for this kind of work, but anything helps. We just overcome along, because we have a lot of different avenues for that money. So I guess, long story short, in the interest of time, what I would like at this time is just for you to consider, number one, partnership, and because I think what you get out of a partnership with us is we will share the data with you. Anything you want, you'll be involved in the process the best that you can. And for a fairly minor cost of perhaps sample analysis for waters within the district's boundaries. What does that look like? I did not have the time to go through and tally up everything that's within Pennington County and whatnot, but I think we came up with 6 lakes.
As far as the lakes are, there's 23 on the list right now, but I think 5 or 6 of them are in Pennington County. There's also 70 or 71 stream sites that would be sampled, probably weekly. And I'm not sure how many of those would fall in this district itself. Right.
So, ballparking it, a sampling set is about $150 per sample set. It's at 5 lakes, 3 times a year, probably maybe 20 streams, 150, 4 to 5 months a year. I'm ballparking it somewhere around $10,000 per year, and the project would be a 2-year project. So I would have a more firm number, let's say the next meeting. Though if this is something you aren't considering, you'd like to know that up front, but if it's something we would consider, I would have definitely a more firm number on that. I'm thinking it's gonna be somewhere around 20 grand for the 2-year project. And that's just for, we wouldn't ask you to, to pay for anything outside of the district boundary or any of that kind of stuff, but, it would help us a lot, and then at that point, we'd have some involvement in the project.
We're not asking for a formal request at this point, but we just kind of want to let you guys know what's kind of coming up, as far as, where we're going with rotating basins. By the way, my name's Chris Dozark, I'm our Section 319 Implementation Coordinator. And so how this would work is figuring out water quality issues through rotating basin would essentially lead to either like protection plans or streams that need to be protected before they get impaired, or actually getting maybe some implementation projects similar to like a Spring Creek implementation project that we had in the past. These would kind of dovetail with each other. Like Paul said, they would do a 2-year assessment, which would essentially lead us to where we need to implement or protect in those watersheds. So that's why I'm here, I guess.
Yeah, I could go into greater detail on the rotating basin project and what it is and why we're doing it, but I assume that most of you have heard that spiel before. So I didn't really, if you have a question, by all means, please ask, but I didn't want to get into the great detail of it unless asked. So, because I could really rattle on.
When did this project start?
The project started in 2019. East Dakota started it. They did a pilot. We were kind of curious to see, they had, I forget how many, I want to say 20-some lakes and 40-some streams, and we were trying to see is it feasible to sample all that in 1 year with the staff that they had, going all the way from northeast South Dakota to southeast South Dakota in a month's time. So
for this section, it would probably start April or May, and it would essentially go through kind of the recreational season. So the samples would essentially start mid to late April probably, and go through probably September, end of September.
Any other questions from the board?
Are you looking for other stakeholders outside of West Dakota's district?
To this point, the stakeholders that we've engaged with have been water development districts, and the main reason is there's really no other partnerships that we've developed that we're capable of really helping us out in anything other than monitoring. So we have not looked at any other partners at this point. We're so used to working with East Dakota Water Development District, and they kind of handle things. Virginia Rivers kind of handle things over that, and we don't understand that you guys don't have that same infrastructure. So, but we can handle it internally, and we're just be looking for some financial support for monitoring within this district.
So you would consider doing rotation 2, but just our little slice of it?
No, we would do the entire thing, paying for the samples outside the district boundary, looking for you to pay for samples within the district boundary.
Okay.
Ron?
Just a couple of comments. I think it's fortuitous that however it transpired, you're looking at the Black Hills region as the second iteration of this effort. Because we do have a lot of irrigation out here that may not be characteristic of some of the other areas, it might be desirable to extend that sampling season, assuming we do it through the end of the irrigation season, which is probably early October.
Sure. Yep.
But, and I can't speak for the board, but I would like to say to bring your proposal to us, for that limited sampling for the boundaries of our district.
Yeah, we don't have anything formal at this point. We just want to get an idea. If you kind of kick this out right now, then the conversation will be over. But we bring it up, and appreciate the support.
Any more questions from the board? Dan, and then Mark. Okay. We have been very familiar, Jay's talked to us a couple of times about this. I sort of asked him at the last meeting, why is he here instead of DENR? And he said, well, to a large extent, this program has kind of been his baby. He's had a fairly major role in developing it. Details aside, you know, the funding levels, the ballpark that you're talking about, I'll echo Director Cope, you know, I'm certainly willing to look at whatever you put on the table.
Yeah, and I think one of the, you know, the deliverables in that situation would be, that data would become available for all of you to see, to use, for other projects you're using, or you're coming to use. I mean, it's important information.
Yeah, I know we're kind of running out of time, so you can just respond quickly, but several years ago, we funded a source tracking study with DNA, with Source Molecular, to look at the source of the E. coli on Rapid Creek, and we got some very interesting results. Was it human versus was it dogs? Is that something that you're looking at all?
At this point, no.
Okay.
My recollection of some of that work that was done years ago on the source tracking, bacteria source tracking, really kind of flopped. And I know that's a harsh term, but false negatives were pretty common. Hey, you know, we're out here and we're taking samples in the middle of nowhere, and it's human, or it's hog. And so some of the libraries at that time weren't great. Where they're at today, I don't know, but we have kind of backed off from that kind of work years ago, and really hasn't been anything that we've done at this point.
Okay.
The Department of Health at one point started to build a library in Old Yards, and that, as far as I know, it kind of went away. So what we're doing is just sampling straight E. coli bacteria to compare against the water quality standard for limited contact and emergent recreation.
The samples that would be taken for this project would be kind of the ones that are in the integrated report, so kind of your standard water quality standards for each beneficial use for each water body. So.
Do you know of any other entities at this point that are doing source tracking type of work?
Not in South Dakota, but probably other
places. It was pretty big back then. Right now, eDNA is an important, the new latest and greatest, where they're looking at DNA strands from fish and bugs and all kinds of stuff. It started out as more of a invasive species, looking for invasive species, and kind of turned into a library where you can take a water sample and tell what kind of fish or bugs or whatever is in the water. The latest thing that I've heard, at least from a source tracking type standpoint.
Okay, thanks.
Two quick questions. One, are you going to be in Spearfish Creek?
This would be in Spearfish Creek.
Yeah. And the second one, are you in the sample digging hole?
No, it would basically just be the standard water quality assessment, like Chris was saying, for water quality standards, DO, pH, nutrients, so it'll spin solid concrete.
What would it take to add that? I think that would be very useful information.
Depend on, you know, with our staff and interns handling most of the monitoring stuff, whether or not they would have time to do that. What do you think about
I
this?
wasn't actually gonna ask
Yeah.
And interesting, the bacteria type.
I thought so they're still digging so much.
Well, most of the other creatures, in contrast, so far it doesn't exist, it's really doesn't exist.
It's
I mean, I heard about digging where they're doing some, adding some nutrients and heat pads and various things to try to kill it. Yeah. Like I said, I
really want to go there.
Quick comment on
Well, so I have a couple of questions, and I came to this meeting because I knew you guys were on the schedule.
No, sorry for that.
And Jay actually asked me to come 2.5 months ago. So, I do have a question about the frequency of sampling and sample design for the water quality samples that you are considering in the hills. And I have a follow-up question after that. Suggest what you're thinking about that.
Okay, in terms of frequency, right now, we're a little limited by just using our staff. In East Dakota, what they did was they sampled waste monthly 3 times a year for the lake sampling, and then once or twice a month. And, Bloody Summer Stream is dry. There's like 70 streams in Black Hills that have what we call assessment IDs, stuff that we monitor and continue to assess and have all the integrated report cycles. Some of those are very small streams that probably in those cases, if we get within the middle of summer and there's only, we're down to 30 or 40, we'll probably try to sample it. Right now, the water board monitoring network, there's generally there's a lot of these streams have already have monitoring sites on them, and monthly to quarterly is what we're doing. A lot of them are quarterly. And quarterly.
Lakes once maybe.
What's that?
Yeah,
Or lakes it's once maybe in a year.
and we have tried to change that in the last 3-4 years,
Yeah.
to where we're trying to hit lakes, 2 to 3 times a year now.
And there are surface crabs, not any depth profile or
We do profiles in the lake.
just with the,
Yeah,
temperature?
yeah, no water.
No.
The surface gas.
At some point, I just wanna, I did put in a 319 proposal about 5 years ago to look more closely at the lakes and coasts. So, I would love to have more of a conversation. I'm a faculty expert.
Yeah, that was the other, I guess the other part of it, Chris wanted to kind of, that was in my spiel on rotating basin, and Chris wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about some implementation projects and what that could look like.
Yeah, so we're just kind of looking, we had Spring Creek implementation going on for a while. We'd really like to get something kind of sparked back up here on the western side. And we're kind of thinking about maybe looking at maybe some protection plans or something like that coming up where we can maybe protect some of these streams or lakes that are not listed as being impaired yet. So there's some things coming up as far as section 319 goes. Yeah, just want to let you know that.
Any other questions? We will move on to item 16 on the
Thank you.
agenda. The admin evaluation for West Dakota Policy 28, and that is what that.
The board is tasked with doing an evaluation of our contract administrator, Dan, every year. And Dan Bierke, our chairman, has appointed me to get that done again. And for Scott and Dennis, you're the 2 new ones here. What we have is a form, and you rate certain tasks, 1 to 5, and then there's room for comments. What I will do is I will email that out to all the directors in November. And I'm gonna ask that you return them to me by Thursday, December 9th. That gives me a few days to tabulate them up. And then I meet with Dan, give him the results, and then it is reported at our meeting in a very general way, because this is a personnel thing. When you return them, you can email them back to me, or if you prefer, put them in a sealed envelope and drop them off at the office. But just look to get those sometime in November, and it should be pretty self-explanatory. And if you have comments to make, that's a lot more beneficial than just saying he's a 1 or a 2 or a 3.
And don't email them to me. Email them.
Yes, yeah, and that'll be clear in the directions that I send
I'll
along.
just give it to you to fill out, and then you can email it to me.
Yeah.
Especially bad ones.
Thank you, Linda, for that one. Item number 17, committee to review admin responsibilities and possibility of a future contract. That is me. This one is that we're coming up, and I was doing some countings and meetings, and I know we've discussed in the last year or 2 different roles of the admin. And so I'm looking to form a committee to look at what the RFP stated, what we have agreed to in the previous contracts and actually build something of expectations, so we're not proposing things to Dan on the fly, and or to look at what the possible options is if Dan ever decided to no longer want to be admin, if that was the route. So I'm looking for a committee of 3 to 4 people to join me, so 3 people to join me to review the admin responsibilities and possibly look at what we want in a future contract if we decide to go that route. Okay, got Ron. One more if somebody wants to do it, and okay.
Could I get those names?
Chaired by Mac, Cove, Fleming, and McGregor.
Okay. Not Driss, okay. Okay, got it.
Number 18 is Chair's comments. Looks like I'm Chair, so I will make a comment. Thank you for coming out. Sorry the meeting was a little bit longer. Hope everyone gets home safe. Item 19, items from directors. Do directors have anything they would like to comment on? None. Oh. Okay, number 20 on the agenda, items from admin. Do you have anything, Dan?
The only thing I'll mention is a week from today, I'll be going to Chamberlain for the annual meeting of the Water Development District, admin, executive directors, whatever their title might be. And other directors are welcome, by the way, but generally it's just the admin people get together and talk about issues that affect their water development districts, and maybe some legislation. For example, redistricting may change how things are done, although that's probably not going to be for another 10 years till the next cycle, but things like that. That's all I had.
Thank you. Item 21, items from the public. None. Moving to item 22. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by McGregor. Is there a second? Seconded by Coe. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Meeting adjourned.
Got your checks. Is that okay?
Well, it says bill 4, and I've only seen a disbursement of like $1,400, so I gotta ask you.
Okay, let me, probably best if we can do it now, or I was going to open the spreadsheet quick here.
Well, get these handed out.
Okay. Yeah, they're,
I just don't understand how it can be bill 4.
does it say bill 4 on the invoice?
Yeah, so I'm gonna pick that. Vengeance is not.
Hi, thanks for coming by.
Yeah, I'll relay back to Jennifer. I know there was a couple of mentions.
The differential between here and town is just.
Yeah, you might come to some more.
Thanks for coming.
Some good stuff.
Yeah, we'll maybe try to find this too.
Yeah,
Well,
that was coming up.
They haven't plowed. By the time I come in, they haven't.
I don't know
Just
if
driving
it's
through.
ending yet,
I mean, I was seeing how much snow, and then here by the valley, brakes, all the snow came off the roof, and if you pick up my windshield, the white man was, that was about that, it wouldn't begin to move, I had to stop, and turn on my flashers, clear a little path there. See, right there, stop like places, stop here. she's not coming. It would depend on, this isn't the best night to do
Oh, yeah.
If it wasn't for the weather, we could pull it in there. I don't know how the weather is now. I'm hoping it changes to rain. Dennis was, well, his wife, when all the grew up, lived across the street from, basically built a house in, I think it was 1976. Okay. So, yeah, their kids grew up together.
Thank you for your service, Director.
I'll check with Dennis. Yeah, well, it was, well, I don't know how it is now. I think that's a good decision.
Yeah, no, I apologize. I told him to try because, when Bruce did it, he like,
Well, it's-
everybody's gotten in, like, this is like, we need to.
It's not, it's, that's become a tradition that however.
Whenever it's available.
Yeah, no,
It's kind of a nice deal,
Huh?
It's kind of a nice deal to do it.
It is.
If it wasn't,
Weather's
weather. But,
December, who knows? You'll hold till it comes.
anyhow.
I don't know if he has to plug something before he can. When he done plug these first?
Yeah, everything that's plugged in gets
Well,
unplugged.
you gotta plug them here first or not?
That'd probably be a good idea.
I don't know if it's still charged, yeah, it's still lit.
You
Okay,
wanna look at this a different time, or?
Let me kill, I forgot to kill
Cause
this.
they've only billed us for like,
yeah, I
I don't
think,
know, what's the difference there?